Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. Today we're going to be providing another installation into our Anti-Federalist Papers series going on number 6. So if you haven't gone back and watched 1 through 5, I would highly encourage you to do so because understanding the arguments for and against ratifying the U.S. Constitution at the time it was being considered is going to be greatly to your benefit in holistically understanding the U.S. Constitution. And because these papers, in addition to the Federalist Papers, are supplementary, not necessarily required, it's best to read them, best to listen, because they're the supplementary part, but understanding the U.S. Constitution is the requisite part if you plan to defend against or combat any lawfare that will be waged against you, your family, or your property. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the Anti-Federalist Papers. There are multiple institutions from which you can get a paper and digital copy of the Anti-Federalist Papers. Please get both formats just in case you can't access one or the other for whatever reason. While you're out there looking, go ahead and pick up a copy, both paper and digital, of the Federalist Papers. Okay, so let's get on to number 6, which is titled The Hobgoblins of Anarchy and Dissensions Among the States. One of the largest series of anti-federalist essays was penned under the pseudonym Sentinel, so it's giving you a little historical context, this version that I'm using. The Philadelphia Independent Gazetteer ran this 24-essay series between October 5th, 1787 and November 24th, 1788. Some historians feel most of the centennial letters were written by Mr. Samuel Bryan, and a few by Eleazar Oswald, owner of the Independent Gazetteer. A more recent study by Charles Page Smith, James Wilson, founding father, Chapel Hill, 1956, refrains from making such theory. This selection is from the 11th letter of Sentinel, pseudonym, appearing in the Independent Gazetteer on January 16, 1788. So he says this: The evils of anarchy have been portrayed with all the imagery of language and the glowing colors of eloquence. The affrighted mind is thence led to clasp the new Constitution as the instrument of deliverance, as the only avenue to safety and happiness. To avoid the possible and transitory evils of one extreme, it is seduced into the certain and permanent misery necessarily attendant on the other. A state of anarchy from its very nature can never be of long continuance. The greater its violence, the shorter the duration. Order and security are immediately sought by the distracted people beneath the shelter of equal laws and the salutary restraints of regular government. And if this be not attainable, absolute power is assumed by the one or a few who shall be the most enterprising and successful. If anarchy, therefore, were the inevitable consequence of rejecting the new Constitution, it would be infinitely better to incur it, for even there would be at least the chance of a good government rising out of its licentiousness. Whoa. Highlight that. There we go. Oh, wow. He is saying that the U.S. Constitution is so bad of a government that it would be better to just have anarchy and then form a new government from the anarchy than to pass the U.S. Constitution. Wow. But to rush at once into despotism. Gosh, does that not ring true today? Really turns your stomach what these gentlemen were able to predict, almost prophesy. But to rush at once into despotism because there is a bare possibility of anarchy ensuing from the rejection, or from what is yet more visionary, the small delay that would be occasioned by a revision and correction of the proposed system of government, is so superlatively weak, so fatally blind, that it is astonishing any person of common understanding should suffer such an imposition to have the least influence on his judgment. Still more astonishing that so flimsy and deceptive a doctrine should make converts among the enlightened freemen of America, who have so long enjoyed the blessings of liberty. Beautiful penmanship. And very simplistic, too. But when I view among such converts men otherwise preeminent, it raises a blush for the weakness of humanity that these, her brightest ornaments, should be so dim-sighted to what is self-evident to most men, that such imbecility of judgment should appear where so much perfection was looked for. This ought to teach us to depend more on our own judgment and the nature of the case than upon the opinions of the greatest and best of men, who, from constitutional infirmities or particular situations, may sometimes view an object through a delusive medium. But the opinions of great men are more frequently the dictates of ambition or private interest. The source of the apprehensions of this so much dreaded anarchy would upon investigation be found to arise from the artful suggestions of designing men, and not from a rational probability grounded on the actual state of affairs. The least reflection is sufficient to detect the fallacy, to show that there is no one circumstance to justify the prediction of such an event. It's fear tactics. On the contrary, a short time will evince, to the utter dismay and confusion of the conspirators, that a perseverance in cramming down their scheme of power upon the freemen of the state, Pennsylvania, will inevitably produce an anarchy destructive of their darling domination, and may kindle a flame prejudicial to their safety. They should be cautious, not to trespass too far in the forbearance of freemen when resting their dearest concerns, but prudently retreat from the gathering storm. The other specter that has been raised to terrify and alarm the people out of the exercise of their judgment on this great occasion is the dread of our splitting into separate confederacies, or republics, that might become rival powers and consequently liable to mutual wars from the usual motives of contention. This is an event still more improbable than the foregoing. It is a presumption unwarranted, either by the situation of affairs, spit it out, Junior. Either by the situation of affairs or the sentiments of the people. No disposition leading to it exists. The advocates of the new Constitution seem to view such a separation with horror, and its opponents are strenuously contending for a confederation that shall embrace all America under its comprehensive and salutary protection. This hobgoblin appears to have sprung from the deranged brain of Publius. Publius, by the way, is more than likely John Jay. Publius, the Federalist, a New York writer, who, mistaking sound for argument, has with Herculean labor accumulated myriads of unmeaning sentences, and mechanically endeavored to force conviction by a torrent of misplaced words. That sounds like it was pulled directly from John Locke's Of the Abuse of Words. Misplaced words. He might have spared his readers the fatigue of wading through his long-winded disquisitions on the direful effects of the contentions of inimical states, as totally inapplicable to the subject he was professedly treating. This writer has devoted much time and wasted much more paper in combating chimeras of his own creation. However, for the sake of argument, I will admit that the necessary consequence of rejecting or delaying the establishment of the new Constitution would be the dissolution of the Union, and the institution of even rival and inimical republics. Yet ought such an apprehension, if well founded, to drive us into the fangs of despotism. Infinitely preferable would be occasional wars to such an event. Wow. He would rather wars and fighting and turmoil than to elect or to impose a despotic government. Dangerous freedom over safe slavery. The former, although a severe scourge, is transient in its continuance, and in its operation partial, but a small proportion of the community are exposed to its greatest horrors, and yet fewer experience its greatest evils. The latter is permanent, and universal misery, without remission or exemption. As passing clouds obscure for a time the splendor of the sun, so do wars interrupt the welfare of mankind, but despotism is a settled gloom that totally extinguishes happiness. Not a ray of comfort can penetrate to cheer the dejected mind. The goad of power with unabating rigor insists upon the utmost exaction like a merciless taskmaster. It is continually inflicting the lash, and is never satiated with the feast of unfeeling domination or the most abject servility. Golly, he is really just driving the stake into the heart. The celebrated Lord Kames, whose disquisitions of human nature evidence extraordinary strength of judgment and depth of investigation, says that a continual civil war, which is the most destructive and horrible scene of human discord, is preferable to the uniformity of wretchedness and misery attendant upon despotism. Of all possible evils, as I observed in my first number, this is the worst, and the most to be dreaded. I congratulate my fellow citizens that a good government, the greatest earthly blessing, may be so easily obtained, that our circumstances are so favorable, that nothing but the folly of the conspirators can produce anarchy or civil war, which would presently terminate in their destruction, and the permanent harmony of the state alone interrupted by their ambitious machinations. Signed, Sentinel. Oh, that one was pretty poignant. If you have any questions about what was being said in Anti-Federalist paper number 6, or in any of the preceding papers, or if there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, please post them down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to provide you with the necessary skills and knowledge to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So please, if you have any questions at all, post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that, plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, let me know how I can do better so I can best serve the purpose of helping you. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'm not sure what the topic for the next lecture is going to be, but I'll do my best to make it as informative and entertaining as this one, if not more so. Regardless of the topic of the next lecture, until I see y'all then, I bid you all farewell.